Ready to roll. And good afternoon, and welcome to Tracksmith's Track House for the Sunday before the 122nd running of the Boston Marathon. Welcome to the Runner's Digest, a third edition of the show on Boston Marathon weekend. I'm Toni Reavis, along with Jonathan Galt, staff writer for LetsRun.com. We have a number of guests to join us on this one-hour broadcast as well. And very cold, wintry day here in Boston. For those of you who missed it, spring blew through here from 9 to 11 a.m. yesterday and stayed all of 2 hours. And then winter came roaring back on a raw east wind, and it's been getting colder ever since. And Jonathan, we talk about how tomorrow, 100% chance of rain at 8 o'clock in the morning. The women's race gets underway around 9:32, and it's going to get harder rain after noon. And so with that as the prediction, we're still saying at least it wasn't today when it's 32 degrees and pretty bitterly cold.
Yeah, I mean, the weather, it's not great out there right now, Tony, but I don't know. Is the headwind as much right now as it's going to be tomorrow? It doesn't feel like it's
No, the headwind's
windy.
not there.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I don't know, if you give me this kind of weather and no headwind versus, it's not really precipitating at the moment either, versus rain and wind, and, you do get a little bit warmer tomorrow. I would probably take this right now, though. I've never run a marathon in either of those conditions, so I can't really say which of the two I would prefer.
Yeah, 38 degrees between 8 and 9 o'clock with a 100% chance of steady rain. From 10 o'clock, by 10 o'clock, they say expect temperatures to be at 40 degrees Fahrenheit with a headwind between 15 and 20 miles an hour with gusts to 35. And from 11 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, heavier rain with a max temperature for the day in the upper 40s. Goody.
Yeah, I think, and the wind is going to be huge. I think we're going to we either have an article right now on the homepage on LetsRun.com, or we will shortly. Robert Johnson, he spoke to John Kellogg, who's sort of his, running guru, running sensei, who's his high school coach, and he's the guy who 7 years ago, before 2011 Boston Marathon, when we saw all those crazy fast times, he said, look at this forecast. It's going to be pretty much perfect for running fast. They're going to run some unbelievable times. I wouldn't be surprised if someone ran close to the world record or faster than world record. It happened. And this time around, talking to John Kellogg, he told Robert that he expects that it's going to be harder. You lose more with a headwind than you gain from a tailwind.
Just like uphill and downhill. You don't gain as much on the down as you lose on the up.
Exactly. And so he said that, you look at the normal winning, if you have normal conditions in Boston, which I would say is probably about 50 degrees and sunny and still, that sort of thing. And, normal is relative for New England, but let's call that average. If you call that average, winning time is probably going to be around 2:08, 2:09-ish, that sort of thing. Faster day, maybe a little faster. But if you get some, really talented guy in the field. But I think, John Kellogg said add about 7 or 8 minutes to what we would say average winning time for that condition. So that gets you to like 2:14, 2:15, and you look back 2007, we've talked about that race as being similar to this one in terms of conditions. Winning time that year, 2:14.
Right, and coming off Robert Chariot's 2:07 course record the year before, adding 7 minutes to his time from a perfect day to a really bad day. I'm not sure it's going to be as bad as 2007. 2015, it was 42 degrees with a 5 to 10 mile an hour headwind coming from the southeast, which is also the direction of the wind tomorrow. But from double that wind with gusts up to 35, I think what leads me to believe is that this is going to be a classic long run with a short race, as it behooves nobody to go in front and try to push. So even though you might use that tactic in a benign day or with a tailwind day trying to separate yourself if you didn't have the kick, you do that on tomorrow's conditions and you run right into that headwind, you're just running yourself out of luck.
Yeah, I think another thing is, making sure to tuck in, and we've seen, that's something that Galen Rupp does a lot, I think, is he will, in particular, he'll try to run behind these guys. And, I think other runners would be smart to follow that pattern as well. Obviously, someone's going to have to be in the front. There's no paid pacemakers in this race, but, you just don't want to be spending energy. And you saw at the Breaking 2 attempt last year, really how much of a benefit they got from that tight drafting formation. And obviously, it's not going to be quite as ideal. You're not going to have people following lasers and Teslas around a F1 track tomorrow. But if you have a tightly packed lead pack and you can find yourself in that second or third level of it with a few guys in front of you, that can really save you a little extra energy. And that sort of thing every little bit helps in a marathon.
No, absolutely. You know, it's just 7 minutes after the hour here, 3 o'clock here in Boston on the Sunday before the 122nd running of the Boston Marathon. We're at Tracksmith's Track House here at 285 Newberry Street, which has been busy, very busy all weekend long. Good place to get out of the cold as well. And we're going to do about an hour show right now. Did you talk to anyone between last show and this show? What have you heard from just your travels around town?
Well, I'm trying to think. I did talk to a few people. Mark Wetmore's agency had a sort of get-together last night, but I'm not entirely sure how many of those. There were a few adult beverages in hand, so I'm not sure if I can really repeat all of the conversations there. But what I did get is a lot of people seem to be talking about Molly Huddle still. She's definitely a popular pick, I think, for a lot of people to win. And another thing, I don't know if you saw this yesterday, Tony, but it might be worth mentioning is Callum Hawkins in the Commonwealth Games Marathon, really pretty tragic, had a huge lead. And talking about weather, the other extreme in the Gold Coast down in Australia, they were running that, and it was 80 degrees and warm. And this is a guy who was 9th in the Olympics. He was 4th at Worlds last year. He's a terrific championship marathoner. But even for him, these conditions were too much, and he was struggling on the side of the road. It was just really painful to watch for anyone who's, for anyone, but especially someone like Callum, who's such a great, talented athlete.
We have a tendency to forget that the marathon is still a challenge. In some ways, it's still an endurance event. So over the last generation, better coaching, better nutrition, more experience. The athletes in many ways have out-trained the distance in benign conditions. But if you put heat on them, you can turn anyone. But conditions can either extend the distance of the event from a practical matter, or it can shorten the distance. A tailwind will make it a shorter than 42-kilometer race. A headwind, like we'll see tomorrow, or heat makes it an extended race. And we've seen that. 7 minutes is almost, that's 2 kilometers, or plus, 2 kilometers plus, when you're talking about what the conditions were back in 2007. Speaking of who people have their money on, I know up on the site right now you've got, we have the prediction, and so a lot of the readers of the Let's Run site have sort of put their money where their mouth is, and what do they have to say?
Yeah, so let's just run through these. They're pretty interesting. We have a great prediction contest sponsored by Running Warehouse that if you haven't entered, just go on the homepage. It's free to enter. You can win some great Adidas training shoes. You can win $100 gift certificates to Running Warehouse. You just have to pick the top 3 on the men's and women's sides, and if you pick the top 3 in order on both genders, and you get the winning times of both races correctly, we'll be giving away $200,018. So if you really are feeling lucky, I would say you don't have anything to lose by entering. But anyway, in those, so we have the analysis as well, so you can see right now who people are picking. I will read off the percentages. This is the percentage of our entrants who have picked these people to win the race. So on the women's side, we have Molly Huddle, 31%. Shalane Flanagan, 21%, Edna Kiplagat, 16%, Eselifetch Murgia, 13%, Jordan Hasay, 12%, and then no one else is above 2%. Notably, Desi Linden is 0.9%. So does that strike you as normal, or anything strike you as off at all with those percentages, Tony?
Well, that's not much respect for Desi, and I think she deserves a little bit more than 0.9%. I mean, I don't think the conditions lend to her winning the race, but she's been I looked at it somewhere. She's had 5 attempts at Boston. She's been 18th, 2nd, 4th, 7th, or something. I mean, she's been, except for her debut back in 2007 in that really rough year when she wasn't the marathoner she's become, she's been right there, solid as money. And we got to realize that she did not run a fall marathon last year, realizing that she was a little burned out physically and emotionally, and she needed that break. And I always likened that to last year, and again this year, Roger Federer in tennis did not play in the clay tournaments in the French Open in order to save himself and rest up for the Wimbledon, which he then won. And I think Desi has basically taken last fall off and sort of recharged herself physically and emotionally. So I think she's coming in really good form. She's never been a tune-up monster beforehand, but she knows how to run on this course. The problem is that with the headwind, her natural big gear tendency to go out and push the pace isn't well served on a day like this. But I still think she's going to figure in the money.
Yeah, and you mentioned taking a break. Who else took a break last year was Shalane Flanagan before New York. She was going to run a spring marathon. She got hurt, and that was, Shalane's been someone who's been very injury resistant throughout her career, so that really afforded her a break. She was always fairly healthy, so she would just continue racing. But when she finally got an injury, she was like, wow, actually, I was a little bit worn down from all those miles, all that running, and when she finally got to run New York, she was pretty fresh, and it worked out really well.
The technical meeting took place in the Fairmont Copley Plaza Hotel at 1 o'clock this afternoon, and right afterwards I caught up with Jerry Schumacher, Shalane's coach and Bowerman Track Club coach in the lobby, and we had a really nice talk, and he said, with Shalane, really the light bulb went off early last year before her back injury, which knocked her out of running Boston. Instead, she joined us on WBZ television, Channel 4, CBS, and did a wonderful job, by the way. I mean, she really thinks she has a future in broadcasting marathons. She was very good at it. But he said the light bulb went off back before she got her back injury. And for some reason, the marathon after the Olympics, it just clicked. All of a sudden, it made sense. It was like after all those attempts of making marathons and doing it, for some reason, after the Olympics and before she got hurt, it made sense. And then the build-up to New York City, it really, like, she reached a tipping point. And I knew when she was preparing for New York that she was a different marathoner than she was before. And that's how she's coming into Boston now. Has no feelings of pressure, is super fit, and it's just a matter of when it gets going, is how does she feel at that moment? And that's what it comes down to, because when it goes, it's going to go hard because they're going to have all that running left in their legs.
Yeah, well, I'm glad her camp feels that way, Tony, but I think, you know, even someone as experienced as Shalane, when you think you've figured out everything in the marathon, it's still the marathon. It's really hard to predict anything or to say, you know, you've got everything figured out. So, you know, I guess we'll see on Monday how true that rings. I just want to run through the men's. This is what Let's Run Nation is voting as the men's winner in the prediction contest. Right now we have Galen Rupp at 47% is the leading man. He's got double the next popular choice, which is Geoffrey Karui, reigning champion, 23%. Then Tamirat Tola at 14%, Lalisa DeCisa 7%, and 2.1% is the next one for Nobit Keegan of Kenya, with no one else above 2%. Notably, I would just say 2016 champion Lemmy Bahanu, he's at 1.1%. So pretty Rupp heavy, but I think, you know, he's still not the majority favorite.
Yeah, but does that surprise you? I was saying in my women's column that I wrote today on ToniReavis.com that, you know, when was the last time that it would have been considered an upset if an American woman didn't win the race? And I think not in the professional era since 1986 for sure, but that's where we are, I believe, this year. And on the men's side, I mean, once again, Rupp is not just like a medal candidate. He's a champion candidate, but 47%, and essentially picking Rupp against the field. If we're going Rupp against the field, I'll still take the field.
Yeah, I would too. I would too for sure, but I think, you know, you look at everyone on the list, I think also the other thing is Galen Rupp's just very well known. If you're on Let'sRun.com, you either love him or hate him, but you know about Galen Rupp. Whereas these other guys, you know, Tamirat Tola, Geoffrey Karui, if you're running Die Hard, you know, you definitely know them. And if you're a, you know, fairly intense running fan, but if you're just a casual fan checking in there, or you're sort of just getting at the information from previews, that sort of thing, you might not have as strong feelings about Rupp. And we also know more about Rupp's preparations. Granted, you know, Alberto Salazar's never been the most free-flowing with information about his, you know, athletes' build-ups, but we do know that Rupp's running a lot of miles, that he's been training really well, that he ran 59:47 in Rome last month. So that's, as opposed to Karui and Tola. Tola hasn't raced since Dubai, and I don't think Karui's raced all year, to my knowledge. So we know more about Rupp's current fitness, I think.
Well, somebody that knows about a number of the runners' fitness for the Boston Marathon tomorrow is our first guest on the show today. He's the founder and coach at Northern Arizona Elite, good friend Ben Rosario. Ben and I are also native St. Louisans, and more than that, we went to the same high school, just 13 generations apart. But Ben has done wonderful work from starting the Big River Running Company in St. Louis and the Festival of Miles, which he began. And this year he's here at Boston with several athletes. And welcome, Ben. Who do you have in the field, and what kind of condition are they in, and how are they looking at these at the conditions which we can't seem to stop talking about?
Well, on the women's side, we have Kellen Taylor. So Kellen was 6th at the Olympic trials in the marathon, 4th at the Olympic trials in the 10,000. She's run 2:28 for the marathon twice in Houston in her debut, and then last year in London, and then she was 8th in the New York City Marathon this past fall. And then on the men's side, we have Scott Smith. Scott just ran 2:12:21 last year in Frankfurt. He was I believe, 4th fastest American male last year in the marathon, and so he's kind of in his prime, and she's in her prime. They're both right around 30, 31 years old, so it was the right time to run Boston for both of them, and they're both very good at downhills, and so it makes a lot of sense for them to be here. The weather, for us, it's fine. I mean, luckily, I guess, we never talked about time anyway for this one. We never had a time goal in mind. We always wanted to just get fit enough to run with the front pack, and so it doesn't really change much for us.
Well, Kellen did just that when she ran at New York City last year. I mean, was with the leaders up the Willis Avenue Bridge, I think, at the top of First Avenue. So she has the feeling. Up First Avenue, if you can handle that emotionally, you can handle anything. She told me when I had a conversation with her Friday at the press conference that she just feels like she's on the cusp of this breakthrough.
Yeah, I mean, after New York, everybody talked about Shalane, and rightly so. And, of course, Allie Kiefer had a breakthrough and did get fifth. But if you look at physically, like how Kellen ran and what she did, it was really, to her own point, very close to a huge breakthrough, because she didn't actually follow that first move where Shalane and that group broke away. She waited until First Avenue and then realized, oh, I should have followed that move, and then caught them from behind and caught back up to the lead pack, which is not easy considering the splits they were running. So, she's right there, and I agree with her. I think she's ready for a breakthrough.
And how about Scott? It's his first Boston. But top 10 he said would be a good performance for him.
Well, yeah, Scott is really well suited for this course. So he's very compact, fairly short athlete, and lands on his midfoot, really, really smooth, no wasted energy. And I guess sort of like you were talking about with Jerry and Shalane, he's really figured it out. His segment was just unbelievably smooth, and it was more than we've ever done, 130-mile weeks and really crazy huge sessions on courses that mimicked Boston and were even really tougher than Boston. And, he ran that 212 last fall, actually, after kind of a bad segment. So everybody on the team is really excited for him to see what he can do now that it's all systems go.
We talk in terms of the weather being difficult. What it seems it's going to do, at least, is going to keep everyone together for a long period of time and put people in position like Kellen, like Scott, in a position maybe later in the race than an ordinary race would not have been the case. So it puts them in a position, if they're having a good day, anything can happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just talking to Ben Bruce, who's our assistant coach and also an athlete for us, but he was saying that he likes it because it really is, because it's just longer. It's going to take longer. So it's more like a 28-mile race than a 26-mile race. And when you see a lot of these marathons, a lot of people seem like they're more prepared for a 22-mile race and then they hang on. So those people aren't going to fare well, most likely, in a race that's actually longer. And we definitely feel like those two are prepared. They could run a 30-mile race if we were running 30. So we feel good about that.
How many athletes have you had running in Boston in the past? And what have you learned about that experience in preparing them that you've now put into play with both Kellen and Scott?
Yeah, so myself, I guess. So I've definitely felt the pain on the hills and understood that, from that I understood that you have to get ready for the downhills. And then I had an athlete that I was coaching in 2013 that was had run 2:17 at the trials the year before and was in really great shape, actually, better than he had been the year before. And he just, classic, afterwards said, man, I got to 16 and aerobically I was fine, but my legs were shot. And so really for me, ever since then, I've known that we were going to train really specifically for this course. It hasn't worked out with our team until now. It just hasn't made sense for anybody, but it really made sense for these two. And so, yeah, I mean, the workouts we've done have been very Boston specific.
Is there a specific part of the course that you think's really important for either Kellen or Scott, or both of them?
Well, not too different than everybody else, of course. I think the race, as it often does, will probably start around 15 because you have that massive downhill and then followed by the very difficult uphill. And so the thing is, even though it's going to be slow early, we think, you're still doing the downhills, so they're still difficult on your body. So we still feel like that 15 to 16 to 17 kind of zone is, I think people will start falling off, even though it's not necessarily going to be all that fast. And then it's going to be, how can you handle the ups and downs and the pace changes during the Newton Hills, which we've also tried to prepare for. So I would say they're no different than everybody else. They've got to try to handle their emotions and handle things physically, mentally through the Newton Hills to get to 21. If we can get to 21, we feel like we've done a lot of work where we've closed really hard, but they got to get there.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the emotions, and obviously Boston Marathon Monday is an emotional day for anyone, whether it's a coach or an athlete or even, me watching the race in the media center. I get excited. Like, how do you keep how do you keep your athletes calm? How do you tell them, obviously they've run marathons before, they know how it goes, but is there any particular advice you give them for not getting overexcited too early in a race?
Well, that's one reason we picked Boston for Scott and Kellen, because they've been through the ringer. They've run the Olympic trials. They've been contenders at the Olympic trials. They've run, of course, Scott, Frankfurt, Kellen, New York last fall. So they've been through big races. So Scott's run at the World Champs. So is Kellen in the half. So that part of it, I think, is okay. They've been through the big pomp and circumstance and all that. The one thing we've done more recently with everybody to kind of keep them calm is we kind of do the race day talk earlier in the week, and I kind of strip it down and just the basics, and then we kind of agree on it, and then it's sort of just like, okay, enjoy the rest of the weekend. So we actually came out here with those two in January to tour the course, and it was really fun. We had a good time, and I just kind of said, hey, take that same approach to this weekend. So no amount of thinking about it is going to change your fitness.
Yeah, and I remember we spoke, about their training earlier this week, and I was sort of asking you how it had gone. You said, they both upped their volume and intensity. You're really, going all in on this marathon. I guess, you're always mostly all in most marathons, I would suppose. But in this one particularly, they really wanted to go for it and give it a shot. They're both in their 30s. Is that something they both came to you with that idea, or is that something you sprung on them, or how did you guys reach the conclusion to really sort of push it and go for it this time around?
Yeah, it was pretty mutual. Definitely it was kind of one of those deals where when we were deciding on which one to do, it was like, okay, if we're doing Boston, we're going for it. You don't come to Boston to play it safe. So we kind of took that approach from day one together. I know Kellen and I sort of had a back and forth, like, okay, are you giving me permission to give you the craziest training you've ever had? Yes. Okay. Well, then I need this from you, which was I needed her to then do all the little things, which she's not always the best at. She hates naps. All these pro runners talk about how many naps they take. She never takes a nap. So she finally started taking naps this segment. I think eventually she needed them. Yeah, I think it was a very mutual thing between us. Yeah.
Well, man, I wish I had a job where my boss was bullying me to take naps all the time. Sounds like a pretty good deal apart from the running 120 miles a week. But and one other thing I wanted to know from you is, you told me they want to go out there and run up front. They want to contend. And, we saw Kellen up there for 20 miles or so in New York. And do you feel like, there are a couple people in this field like Karui or Tola or maybe even Galen Rupp, but I don't think you would do this, that are capable of breaking away early had the conditions been good. So do you like it that it's sort of easier for them to run at the front, just that everyone's going to be there with these bad weather conditions? Or would you, I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you can never script it how you want it.
Yeah.
The thing is, they're very, very fit. So as crazy as this sounds, I wouldn't have minded it if it was a little faster, because I think just pure fitness, they don't stack up with Tola necessarily on a benign course, as Tony said, but they're really very fit. I guess if I could have scripted it out, like for Scott, I would have loved like 104.30, 105, but it's not going to happen, so it's kind of a moot point. But do I think it's better that it's going to be slow? Probably. I'll say this is good emotionally, because Kellen said this after New York. You build momentum when you're in it, and so the fact that. And it's not just Scott and Kellen, it's everybody. It's going to be a big pack. I think everybody, as long as they're not letting the conditions get them down mentally, they're going to feel more and more excited as it goes along, and that's a good feeling.
Ben, I know that you guys had a really good year at Northern Arizona Elite. For those that don't know, can you talk about you signed on, you got your sponsorship is solid. Talk about the state of one of the really great up-and-coming programs in the country.
Sure, it was a huge year. So Hoka One, our title sponsor, re-signed us in earlier this year, all the way through the 2020 Olympic cycle. And if you're into the business of the sport, I can tell you that that's not easy to do, to get these title sponsorships. And so the fact that we can have right now 10, and I think we'll probably add 2 or 3 athletes this summer. So let's say a dozen or so athletes that we can pay, and that they can be professional athletes and train together at a high level at Flagstaff, Arizona, 7,000 feet. That's what you need to have a true pro group. You need to have the the funding and the sponsorship, and that's what we have from Hoka. So getting that done was great, and then now it's just a matter of trying to put each athlete in the best position they can possibly be.
Well, that's great. I know Kellen's been with you since the beginning, so it'd be great to see her really bust a good one here tomorrow. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us over and here in Trackhouse. And best of luck to your athletes, and we'll talk to you after the race tomorrow.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks very much, man.
Ben Rosario, who's the co-founder and the coach here at Northern Arizona Elite and St. Lucie High Junior Billiken back in the day. That's the thing, that we have so many of these A-level marathoners, what I call them. I mean, the people we're really talking about, the Kuruis, the Tolas, the Rups, etc., that we forget that there's some talented kids like Kellen and Scott who are right there, who have got all the confidence in the world and are ready to take on anyone. And I think that in many ways what Meb back in 2014, and then Galen winning in Chicago last year, and New York with Shalane winning the title, I think all the Americans up and down that list are basically saying, if they can do it, why can't I do it at the same time? I know that in talking to Mary Kate Shea, who is the lead athlete coordinator and does the invitings for John Hancock, she was saying that that's exactly what Molly Huddle said. If Shalane can win this, any one of us Americans can win this thing on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the Olympic trials a couple of years ago. Obviously you have some of the big groups getting people through and making the teams. Rupp, Bowerman Track Club went 1-3 in the women's side, but there's always one or two people. If you look at the history of the Olympic trials, there's almost always one or two people who make it who don't have this huge funding and support. This most recent one, you would look at Jared Ward. He's a guy who got third place at the Olympic trials. He made the team. He's not part of a huge training group. He's sponsored by Saucony. He trains out in Utah under his college coach Ed Eyestone, a two-time Olympic marathoner himself. But he's not. They benefit. I'm sure they have their own sports science sort of thing over there, but it's not like all this underwater treadmill stuff that Rupp uses. I don't think it's quite as advanced as that. But you got people like that, or even Tyler Pinnell. He was very close to making the team. Made that big move in 2016 at the trials. He's with Zap Fitness. I mean, you have like these groups that are pretty good training environments. There's a lot of good coaches out there, and if you put a pretty talented athlete with the right day, you can have a lot of success. And you look at what Jared Ward did in Rio. He got 6th place in the in the Olympic marathon, and that's not something that I think a year before that anyone would have seen coming.
No, I think him making the team was kind of a surprise. Well, even though he was like the top American finisher at the LA Marathon and the National Championship the year before that, taking 3rd overall in the race, a testament to our good friend Coach Ed Eyestone as well. Ed has got a great history himself and a great program there at the BYU school as well. As we take a look at this list of top names down here, and we've already sort of gone through who we think the top people are. Although I saw one of the chats here on our board talking about, are the Let's Run guys, are they going to give their predictions themselves, because they said they would?
All right.
A lot of pressure on John.
I've made my prediction contest picks. If we want to, if you want to put me on the spot, I can read through them. I know Robert and Weldon, Robert especially likes to wait till the very last minute till he has all the available information to make his predictions. But he'll probably put him on the message board because he's not going to be here. But in terms of who I'm backing, I guess we'll start with the men. We've said how the field is probably the favorite over any one individual person, but since I have to pick individual people, I'm going to go with Rupp. And it's not that I'm disrespecting Karui or Tola, though I guess, if the fact that I'm picking against them, maybe people will view that as disrespecting them, but I mean them no disrespect. I just think there are a lot of really good athletes, and only one of them can win. I know that Rupp's fit, and the biggest thing, and Robert said this on Friday, is Rupp just doesn't have bad races.
Exactly.
He gets to the marathon, and he's run 4 pretty much A-plus marathons. And so if I had to back anyone, watching this race last year, I remember watching it and seeing Rupp and Karui, and it was down to those two, and I'm like, this is it. Game over. It's a guy I don't really know of, and it's Galen Rupp who closes out these marathons like it's his job, which, it is. And so I was like, I bet everything right now that Rupp's going to win this race. And he didn't, which I was very surprised by, but I think he's had a better build up. I think this time it will be different. But second and third, I'm going to say, I think Karui probably for second place, because like I said, he is a fantastic athlete. I think at his best, we've shown he's arguably better than Galen Rupp because he beat him last year. He is the world champion as well. So, and he also did some of his build-up this year with Patrick Sang's group, which is the best marathon group in the world. So he's a guy, we all know how good he is at this point, but we just don't know how good his training has been for this specific build-up.
Right, exactly. So he's more in the dark, and we know a lot more about Rupp than that. How about third pick on the podium?
Third place, I'm going to go with Tola. Again, he's a guy who won Dubai last year in a course record, and he decimated that field. I mean, you watch the way he ran it. It's a very different race than Boston. So maybe it's up to you how much you want to read into that performance. But they went out hard at I think world record pace through halfway, and everyone else died off because it was hot in Dubai. That was the year Kenenisa Bekele was there, and he DNF'd because of a fall at the start line. Mm-hmm. Well, that was the reason given, was that he fell at the start line and was too injured to continue. And everyone else was just falling off one by one. Tola kept grinding it out, and okay, he ran a slight positive split, but he still ran 2:04.11 on a pretty warm, muggy day in Dubai. So, and he ran even faster this year, in case you forgot, but he didn't do quite enough to win the race, as there were a few other studs in there. But he's my pick for third place, and he also owns Rupp head-to-head. He beat him in the Olympics in 2016 in the 10,000 to get the bronze medal. He crushed him, in fact, at the Prague Half Marathon last year before Boston. And again, Rupp wasn't going into that with the smoothest build-up. But that really shows you, Tola's had some terrific performances. If he can translate it to the Boston Marathon course, I think he's going to finish in the top three and obviously could even win if he has a good day.
Well, those are solid picks. A lot of people, I look at, there's the extra guy that fits into there. I think those three are the people are talking about, but the other guy they're talking about is Lalisa DeCisa, the 2013 and 2015 champion, who won on a rainy, cold, windy day in 2015. And when I talked to him at the press conference, says, I like these conditions. Now, when's the last time you heard an East African say, I like cold, rainy, windy conditions? But he's been very loose. There's only 3 Ethiopians in the field, and they've all been hanging out with one another at the hotel. They've all been taking their meals together. I was talking to Mary Kate Shea again, and she was saying this is an important race for DeCisa because he's won it twice, and her whole philosophy in putting this field together was as many recent PRs as possible. I mean, you look at these fields, she's looking for PRs running in 2016 or 2017, on form in recent times, and also guys who have raced against each other. So especially Karui and Tola, that's World Championship gold and silver. That we're talking about Karui and Rupp, first and second in Boston. So there's history with one another, and there's recent PRs. But DeCisa, his PR goes all the way back, I think, to 2013. So he has the deepest, and it's almost like it's time to put another marker in the road. He was only third last year at New York City, and really wasn't in top form. And it's almost like at the cusp of his career where that tipping point again, where are you going to reacquaint yourself with that highest A level, or are you going to begin to drift out of that A-level athlete category?
Yeah, no, we see that all the time. I mean, you think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, some of the top guys in the world were Geoffrey Mutai, Emmanuel Mutai, and Dennis Cometto, and really none of them have run a good marathon. I think a lot of people would call them washed up at this point, and that's really what happens. Marathon, because you only get 2 cracks, maybe 3 a year. If you go, 3 or 4 races without running a good one, people are going to start saying, "What's wrong with this guy? Does he still have it?" And I think people are asking that question with DeCisa, even though he did get third in New York last year.
Right, but I think also when you find out back in the Bill Rogers day, the Frank Shorter era, even Alberto Salazar era, in that time, Rob DiCostella, Carlos Lopez, Toshihiko Seiko, the great runners of the 70s and 80s and on. I mean, they're running 2.8, 2.9, 2.10. And they're running a lot of races in between to do their build. They weren't training 3 months for one all-out effort at 2:03 or 2:04. And I think the training just literally takes it out of you. So the peak years are much shorter now than they were in the past because they're going closer to 100%. They're going for that all-out effort twice a year, and that's taxing.
Look at Ryan Hall. Yeah, I mean, Ryan Hall had a few amazing years. One of the best stretches we've ever seen by an American marathoner. But he was, I think, probably about the age Galen Rupp is now. He was pretty much done, I think, from the marathon just because he put so much into all those build-ups and he cranked out some fantastic races, but it's just really hard to sustain that level of training.
At the technical meeting, I ran into Abdi Abdurrahman, everyone's best friend in the sport. I mean, there's no one that doesn't like Abdi. If you can spend time with Abdi, you got yourself a fun evening.
Yeah.
And he said he was 3 months training over in Sulata in Ethiopia, and fit as fit can be. He was over there with Mo Farah, among other people, getting in with that big camp. I know, having been to his place in Tucson, he did almost all his training by himself. And he would go up to Flagstaff sometimes and train with some others. But even at his Masters division age, which, I mean, did he run 6th here last year and was the winner of the Masters division as well? I know he had a good race here, but he says he is as fit as he's been in a long, long period of time. And again, with all that experience, 4-time Olympian, I mean, not going to win, but Abdi's very quietly assured of himself in this race, and I don't think he runs very, very badly either. He's got all that experience under his weight, and again, without them going out and being 204-ish or 203-ish, the lack of speed that comes along with being a master is not as important.
Yeah, and Abdi, I mean, last year as a 40-year-old, Abdi was leading the charge up Heartbreak Hill with Rupp and Karui, and it was just pretty phenomenal to see. Even to see him get that far, you know, the thing that's really amazed me with him and Meb isn't just that they run well in these marathons, that they're consistently, you know, in the top 10 or 5 or so against, you know, it's in World Marathon Majors. It's that they're at the front of the race. They're not afraid to, like, even though they're the old guy, to be pushing it on some of these hard parts of the course. And, you know, he did fade a little bit, but then he came back and he finished as the top American man in New York, which he also was in 2016 when he was 3rd. And this is a guy who he ran his marathon PR all the way back in 2006 in Chicago. So he's a guy who's been going for very strong, and, you know, he's going to be 43 by the time of the 2020 Olympic trials, but I think, you know, age is just a number to Abdi. He'll probably have some funny crack about it if I ask him, you know, are you going to keep going to 2020? He'll have some joke.
What do you think is going to happen with Yuki Kawauchi, the great Japanese, the prolific Yuki Kawauchi, who just this January in Marshfield down here in South, because that's where Mary Kate Shea is from, and they came down here and ran the Marshfield Marathon. He ran 2:18 and change. It was 6 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, just it had to be one of the great 2:18s in history. It was his 76th record, 76th sub-220 marathon. But the guy's a legitimate I mean, he's run 2:8, but he's a legitimate 2:09 guy. He's run that 3 or 4 times in his career, and he's been on the course, Mary Kate says, every day. Well, the slower it is, the weather. I mean, this guy's not folded in these conditions.
No, he'll be up there for sure. And actually, yeah, the Marshfield Marathon he ran, that was even worse conditions than what he's going to have tomorrow, because it was, if you remember, it was New Year's Day, and it was brutally, brutally cold in Boston on New Year's Day. There was ice on the track, I think, when he was running. He almost slipped as they were coming on the finish line because it was on the Marshfield High track. And he was also the only guy in that race. It was just him. He was the only finisher. But I talked to Brett Lana, who sort of helps handle his travel arrangements, that sort of thing. He also writes the Japan Running News blog online, details Japanese marathon, Japanese runners, all that sort of stuff. And he was telling us, yeah, well, he got a break because he's a federal employee in Japan, or I think he's a federal employee. He definitely works for the government in Japan, and they get the New Year's, that's a big holiday, big celebration, so they get some time off. So he wanted to take that time off to come to Boston and check out the course. And while he was over here, he was like, well, I want to get this world record for most sub-220s. Is there a marathon around here? And it's like, oh, well, actually, there is. There's one in Marshfield, which I don't know if it exists or if they made it up for him, because, again...
No, because Bobby Hodge ran it. It was his first marathon. He ran 2:47 to get his qualifier to go to his first Boston Marathon.
Okay, there we go. So it did exist, even though he was the only guy who ran it this year, so it probably wouldn't have existed without him in 2018, how bad the conditions were. But he ran it. He got to check out the course. And, you know, if you're making a trip from Japan just to run this little marathon and to check out the Boston Marathon course, you're clearly pretty serious about checking out the course, making sure you want to run well in Boston. So I think this is a, you know, he runs a lot of marathons, but this is a big deal for him if he was going to make that scouting trip. And he will run it tomorrow, and then he has to be back to work by Wednesday because he was a full-time employee as well.
You're listening to the Runner's Digest here at Tracksmith's Track House, 285 Newbury Street in Boston, Massachusetts, in the Back Bay. Not 1 block from the Heinz Auditorium and all the other activities that are going on here at the Boston Marathon. My name is Toni Reavis, alongside Jonathan Gault, a staff writer for Let'sRun.com, and we just got a little message that your boss, Weldon Johnson, is on his way. He's in a cab, said he'd be here by 3:40. It's 3:41 right now. Let's see how accurate he would be. There's traffic in the Back Bay, and not always easy to predict how fast you're going to get here. But we're expected to be joined by Weldon when he comes along. Anyone else in this field that we don't talk about the wheelchairs right here. I know it's a great wheelchair field. Boston's always had great wheelchair racers. Manuel Achar and Marcel Hug, the Silver Bullet, both Swiss, ran world bests last year under good wheelchair conditions. This will be more brutal for the wheelchairs in tomorrow's conditions than it is for the runners because of the nature of the speed they're going. The headwind is even more difficult. The drafting is even more important in wheelchair racing. It's hard to get away anymore. These races never used to come down to a sprint. Now they always come down to a sprint. We can expect that again. I talked to Ernst van Dijk from South Africa, who's the greatest number of wins in any category in Boston history at 10 wheelchair titles. And he said he's really worked on his sprinting because he's a big man and would always get away on that big gliding downhill right out of Hopkinton, and they would never be able to catch him. Well, now they're able to catch him, and then they've usually been able to outsprint him. And he says, I've really worked hard at that, but that Marcel Hug has really got these rainy conditions down. Again, it's like some people just, they don't enjoy them, but they seem to work better in them. And he says, Marcel Hug, the big question is, and talking to Manuel Achar, she was saying the same thing, it's like they don't stroke their chair, the push rim, they hit it. I mean, they punch it, and you lose. And when it gets wet, you lose grip. And that big downhill at 25K going on to Newton Lower Falls out of Wellesley really is. I mean, it's a matter of chair control that's dangerous. If you don't get a control of your chair at the top of that hill, you're not going to get control of it in the middle of the hill, and you could easily go down and have a pretty bad crash. So expecting wonderful wheelchair competitions again here at the Boston Marathon, which is the inaugural, the genesis of wheelchair racing back in the late 70s with Bob Hall. And Will Cloney, the race director, told him, if you break 3 hours, I'll give you a finisher certificate. And Bob ran 2:58 in that race in a 40-pound Everson Jennings wheelchair, which is right out of the hospital essentially. Nowadays they got 14-pound carbon fiber chairs that cost $20,000, and they're pretty slick. But so anyway, just wanted to give a nod to the wheelchair athletes, and as we just talked about them, your boss Weldon Johnson just found his way in, and he's dumping his bags, and he'll join us shortly.
Yeah, and one other person, you sort of mentioned people we haven't talked about so far this week, and I think one who might be worth highlighting is Serena Burla. She's 35 now. She's a cancer survivor. She ran a PR last year in Osaka of 2:26. She ran the World Championship Marathon as well. She finished 11th there in 2:29. And, it's pretty phenomenal she's back here running because a few days after Worlds, she's already a cancer survivor, and she found there was a lump in her leg, and she had to have surgery on that to have that removed. It turns out, I believe that was cancerous as well. Now she's back running again, and she's someone, she's not going to be probably top 5, but she is it certainly could happen given this field and this conditions. It's not a very, beyond the Americans and a couple internationals, it's not that deep, certainly as compared to the men's field. So, and she's a good championship racer, and she's tough as nails. So she's someone who, if she's up there, maybe she could get 7th, 6th, 8th, somewhere in that range. I think she's someone to watch, and obviously an inspiring story.
No, somebody easy to root for, and she just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. Well, Weldon just showed up, and what I'm going to do is perfect because I've got to go out to WBZ television in order to do a production meeting for tomorrow's show. And to those of you here in the New England area, watch our show as opposed to the NBC Sports show. I'll be on with Lisa Hughes, anchor here in Boston, and Catherine Switzer, and we'll have a wire-to-wire coverage of the 122nd Boston Marathon. But let's bring in Weldon Johnson. We had Robert. Now it's time for Weldon. Nice to see you, Weldon. How are you?
It's good to be here. Driving in, actually, with listening to the show, I could hear some of you guys. And I just caught a couple of things because getting off that plane, the first thing I thought about was the weather. It's crazy. And the two things I heard you talk about was, I guess the CISA ran well in the poor weather here a couple years ago. And then it cut out. And then I heard you guys discussing Kawuchi's chances. So I think the train of thought here is the right one, actually, because, these guys aren't used to racing in these conditions at all. But what's the latest with the weather for tomorrow? Or have you guys already talked about that?
Yeah, that was the first thing we said, but it's not good, man. It is not good. You look at people have been screenshotting it all week, and I saw one most recently, I think a few hours ago, like Jesse Squire had something up, and it's just going to be mid to high 40s, I think, for a lot of the race. It's going to be headwinds of 15 to 20 miles an hour with gusts up to maybe 25, 30. And it's coming out of the east, which means that it is blowing into the runner's face for pretty much the whole way. So it's, I wouldn't have fun doing an easy run in those conditions, but these guys are all going to have to run 26.2 miles. It's not very far from ideal for marathoning.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of Boston. I mean, I haven't been in Boston since 2012, I think. And, I mean, that's the one thing with Boston. Usually it's the course that sort of throws the runners off. You always have the hills. You don't know what's going to happen. But this year, top it off with a wind. Usually I feel like hot temperatures that throw everybody off. But I don't know. I mean, it's a foot race. That's why we love Boston. It's, the hottest thread right now in Let's Run is like they've got to be thinking about canceling. And on the way over, I was reading an article from the Boston Globe 2007, and I guess it was very similar weather till tomorrow, and they contemplated canceling it. But I figured the New England Spirit, there's no way they cancel unless I feel like it'd have to be way worse. And also Boston, like another thing, since so many people qualify, I think people are actually better prepared.
Yeah, no, you obviously you have some charity runners, but a lot of the people here had to earn their way to the start line. They know how to train. They're not just, they're obviously here for the experience, but most of them are serious runners. So they are going to be prepared. They're going to know, hey, I need to take this stuff to the start line. I need to wear this certain gear. I need to drink this beforehand. They're going to know how to go out there and how to prepare and how to run. So, I think you'll definitely see that. And they're not canceling this thing. Let's be real. It's just not happening. Like, they needed Superstorm Sandy to cancel New York in 2012, and I think you would need sort of an equivalent event to cancel this one. Especially, like, they can't cancel it until, they would have to cancel it, make an announcement at some point this evening, I think, because by the time the morning of the race, everyone's already too deep into the preparations. As too much has gone into it, it's hard to get the word out to everyone. But I think tonight, it's going to happen. It might not be fun, but it's going to be fun to watch, I would say.
Yeah, definitely fun to watch. Tony's gone, so we're flying solo, John. I don't know what you guys have talked about or where to go. I see Robert's debating trying to call in and make predictions, but I don't know. We got
Liam Boylan-Pett, I think, was going to come on as a guest. So.
All right, we got Liam Boylan-Pett coming on as a guest, and are definitely our predictions.
Good. Liam is like ourselves, a former Ivy League alum. I think he was definitely a better collegiate runner than both Weldon and I. But
it's not saying much, John.
He's also a very talented writer as well. He's in town covering the race for the Athletic Boston. So maybe Liam, give maybe a 10-second intro about who you are, what you're doing here.
Yeah. I'm Liam Boylan-Pett. I used to work for Runner's World and Running Times. I now just freelance, RIP Running Times. But now I'm writing for the Athletic Boston this weekend, and they're a subscription site. So if you do want to read the story that I'm about to talk about, just sign up for a 7-day free trial and then remember to cancel. That's what I've told all of my family members to do. So, I came on to talk about this story from 1968. So the guy that I was researching 1968 races and came upon this story where Donald Murray was a police officer, and in 1952 he was a 600-meter state champion runner from Hyde Park High School, and he ran the 1968 Boston Marathon and finished in 291st place. 3 days later, he's working his beat on Boylston and 2 blocks up from the Boston Marathon finish line, and an employee from Louis of Boston, a fancy men's store, comes running up to him in the street. He's directing traffic, and this guy says, "Someone robbed our store." And this police officer starts chasing. He had just run 26.2 miles 3 days earlier, and he's running all through Boston. And he goes straight down Boylston towards Clarendon Street, takes a right there through the Chase building, up to Newberry, which we're on right now. And then he goes through a class. He goes into a school, through a classroom, into a back alley, back out onto Newberry, and ends up on Boylston, chasing this guy in what was a $165 top coat and catching him. And so 2 days after the Boston Marathon, the best run in Boston was actually a police chase.
that is pretty phenomenal. And I got to say, I've run 2 marathons. I can't imagine moving at any speed above about a crawl 3 days after I ran a marathon, let alone chasing someone down and, catching him successfully. So I'm in awe of that accomplishment. I mean, how did you come across this story?
Every once in a while, I go on to newspapers.com when I'm bored and just search stories. And I think I just typed in Boston Marathon, and this one came up. But this guy, I mean, as you said, 3 days after you run a marathon, you can barely walk. And this guy, the police officer, Donald Murray, was also in police boots. He had on his police-issued winter coat over a sweater. He had his gun, his police club with him, and he didn't get a chance to take any of that off because he just had to chase. And he was running through Boston, and at one point they heard gunshots, and so he thought it was possibly the thief, but it turns out it was another cop firing off a warning so that the thief would turn around. And so they ended up keeping that out of the stories because the other cop came up to Donald Murray and said, "Hey, don't tell anybody about this." And cops looked out for cops back then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's...
They still do, I think.
I think they still do. But
Oh, that's wild. And that was the year Amby Burfoot won that.
Amby
year,
Burfoot
right?
won.
So
Yeah, I tweeted out my story and kind of made a knock. I said, no offense to Amby, but the best race in Boston in that 1968 was Donald Murray.
And how long do we have a PR? What's the PR for this route that he ran? What's the time to beat? Do we know how long it took?
This
him to do?
route was about 2.5 miles, and I think it ended up being about 30 minutes, which was with a lot of stops and stuff. Because at one point they jumped onto the back of a moving truck, and he commandeered a cab. He did that thing in movies where he yelled, "Follow that truck!" So it was honestly like a made-for-Hollywood police chase 3 days after the marathon.
Yeah, I didn't know that this sort of thing actually happens. Like you see it in movies all the time, like a foot chase through a foot chase through an urban city. But to actually think that it happened in Boston with a marathoner right around the marathon in the place where the marathon finishes, it just seems like it's totally made up, but it's great.
Yeah, no, and this guy, they called him, at first when he couldn't see who he was chasing, everyone was yelling, "That away, officer." So for like a year after this, in the police precinct, they called him Officer That Away. So that was his kind of nickname for the rest of the way. And this guy ended up he ran at a bunch of world police and fireman games. He loved running. I spoke with his son for the story, and he sent me probably 50 pictures of his dad, competing at these things, and it was just incredible. He was really proud of his dad, which I would be too with something like that. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome story. I guess I'll have to sign up for at least a free trial or something to
Please
make
do,
sure I
please
read
do.
it. But
Go read there.
What's newspapers.com? I'm even not familiar with that. But was
Oh,
there an article just on the arrest and the chase? And
So no, newspapers.com is just an archive, and so they have stories from. It's really kind of hard to search. Every once in a while, I typed in race in 1968 Boston because I knew it was the 50-year anniversary, and they just have a bunch of archives of newspapers. So it's kind of like looking at microfilm from back in the day. That's how I was just scrolling through.
maybe just hold the mic a little closer.
Yeah. And this story was, I found the AP story, but then he ended up being on the cover of the Boston Globe. He was on the cover of the Boston Herald the next day. And his son didn't find out until he was at a prep school, and he came to class the next day. And his dad hadn't told him about him, and he got called in front of the classroom, and the teacher read the story, and so the kid got a standing ovation in his class the next day.
Oh wow. Yeah, I mean it's amazing. I was looking for a story I wrote last year before Boston through some newspapers in the 50s, and it's actually amazing how many newspapers were in Boston at that time. I think there was about 6 of them, and B, how much coverage they gave to the race and everything. They had some Japanese runners come in, and my story was about this Japanese guy who was he'd grown up outside Hiroshima when the atomic bomb was dropped, and he came in and was the first Japanese guy to win the Boston Marathon. And so I was looking through, and they would have like a daily update about what the Japanese people had done today, and how they had been training and where they had been and all this sort of thing. And they would have stories about where the rental house they were staying at and all these sort of people. And it was all these sort of details they took running, or at least the Boston Marathon, very, very seriously. Whereas if you look at the Globe this week, you get a few stories. There was a front page story on Galen Rupp, but it's not the same level of detail about every single guy. It would be basically if they had someone said, okay, your beat for this week is to follow Geoffrey Karuri around town and just tell me everything he does. That's the sort of minutia they were able to pull.
Yeah, and they also had some phenomenal headlines back then. The AP story made the rounds in papers throughout the country, and the first one was just like thief's flight, no marathon. Cop runs 291st in marathon, but first in chase. But my favorite headline, it did not make the story because we didn't know what the word was, but flabby felon, just no match for fleet-footed Fosdick. And it turns out Fosdick is some is a comic strip from the 50s and 60s, and I had no idea what it was. And I wanted it to be in the story, but we couldn't tell what a Fosdick was. He's kind of like a hero to some comic character. So he's a fictional character within a fictional universe. So it's kind of funny, a Fosdick.
So were your editors worried that Fosdick might turn out to be something extremely dirty, or?
I was worried it was, and I looked up what it was before I sent it over to make sure it wasn't something crazy, but it just was not well known enough to keep it in the story, unfortunately.
Well, it definitely wins the alliteration award as well. Right. So you're in town covering the race as well, obviously, and I'm assuming you'll be watching from the media center tomorrow.
Yeah, thankfully in the media center in the warm.
What are you most excited for covering this race? What are you most excited about the race?
I mean, the women's field is just incredible. The men's field, I mean, it's hard for me to get that excited about that race, but it just doesn't seem the field's quite as good. And whereas the women's field is just, I mean, aside from, say, like, who knows what happens going to happen with Gwen Jorgensen, but I think she's going to be good. So I think it's missing kind of her. And then if either Emily Sisson or Emily Infeld jumps up, and Amy Craig, this is just the top U.S. women marathoners. So I'm really excited that they put together this field where it is just a bunch of heavy hitters going at it.
Yeah, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. Out of the American field, who is the top American finisher, and does she win the race?
I'll go with Molly to win. I really think just seeing how well she's done on the roads, and I know the marathon, this is only her second one, but I think it's hard to pick against her. It's obviously really hard to pick against Shalane as well after winning New York 6 months ago, but I really just think Molly, just the way she hammered the half marathon and the 15K, it's hard to pick against someone who I think is going to be able to handle fast pace, or I think it's going to be slow tomorrow, so I think that helps her even more.
Yeah. And the Jorgensen thing, actually, that's something interesting to me. I know Weldon's been pumping up everything Gwen Jorgensen does. We have we had an article about it. We haven't been freaking out, but we had a big debate, and I think one of the things I said when she first announced she was going to run and try to win the Olympic gold was I said there's a 0% chance she's going to win Olympic gold. And this became, Chris Chavez started asking her about this, and it became a thing on like running Twitter for like a few days. Like, is there a 0% chance? And I mean, all right. Technically, no, there's not a zero. Like, there's a non-zero chance that the sun might explode right now and we're all dead by the end of this podcast. But I don't think it's going to happen. And it's sort of the same thing with Jorgensen. It's just like, if this happens, this would be, it would sort of be like, Michael Jordan going to baseball and then winning the MVP for baseball. It would be that, triathlon. There's a little bit more overlap between triathlon and marathoning than there is between baseball and basketball. But you sort of get the gist of it. It would just be an incomprehensible to me athletic accomplishment. But do you think 0%, 1%? What's the odds that she could actually do it? How good do you think she'll be in the marathon?
I mean, Nike didn't pay me for this, but I'm going to say 4%. No, I'm just kidding. No, I don't. Gold medal, I think, is a different story. That I'm going to go with 0.1%. But I think making an Olympic team, which I think is still an amazing accomplishment, I think there is a chance of that. And I guess 15%, I don't know, because I think it's just really hard to put anybody above 30% anyway. Like, I just think that's a very amazing accomplishment. But I do, after she ran the indoor, I think I read your guys' article, the debate, and whoever said, when she ran 15:15, that was kind of a eye-opening thing for me. The 10K was great, but the 15:15 was, being right behind Emily Infeld, was definitely much more impressive to me. And, I mean, I think it was probably 2013 or 2011, one of those years she ran the New York 5K the day before the marathon, and she came and just whooped on a bunch of runners, and she was a triathlete at the time, so that's why I didn't use a runner for her, but she came and just whooped on everybody, and it wasn't an amazing field, but it was a really good field. And I remember thinking, who is this woman? And now I found out she's just one of the best she is the best triathlete in the world and could be one of the best runners.
Yeah, the 15:15 was amazing because I think she had a baby within 4 or 5 months before that. Under 6 months. That's pretty crazy. But, yeah, what her chances are, 1%, 0%, 5%. One thing Liam said was that the women's field is stronger here than the men's. And right away my phone starts beeping, and it's Robert back home saying, that's nuts, the men's field's stronger. But I get what he's saying. Internationally, the men's field's stronger.
Yeah.
The women's field, you have 4 Americans who can win it. And I think sort of one thing to quibble with John is if, Jorgensen was, let's say she was good enough, this was the Olympics or something, and she was in this field, you'd have to say she has some % chance to win. But if you had this field here, and then you threw Tirunesh Dababa and Mary Keitany, even if she was in this race in a 2:22 marathoner, I'd still give her probably a 2% chance with those people in the race. So,
Yeah.
but the women's running is so good. Like, I think in my head I can see her making the team, and once you make the team, a medal for sure is definitely. The American women are so ridiculously good, and that's the crazy thing. It's just how good they are, and also everyone like you, they're loving Molly Huddle. Shalane Flanagan won the New York City Marathon, and I thought everybody was in love with Jordan Hasay, but
no, yeah, I mean, I think everyone has been kind of just hearing things with Molly, and it's 100% fair to say the men's field is stronger. I think I'm as a track fan in the U.S. especially, that's what I was kind of more speaking to. I was more excited about the U.S. women's field, and that they, I think, have a really good chance to win. For me, there's 4 of them that have a chance to win, that's why I say it was a deeper field. But to say the overall field, you're probably correct. The women's, U.S. women's distance running right now, I think outside Aaron Strout wrote an article about just like the stage it's at right now. It's just incredible. And yeah, if Gwen did make an Olympic team, yeah, she probably does have a shot at a medal. If she's going to be good enough to make the team, she will be good enough to possibly medal, I feel like.
Yeah. No, I think, once getting on the team is the really impressive hard part. And, I would say her chances of making the team are way higher than 0%, way higher than, even 1%. It's definitely possible. It's something I could see happening. Like you said, once she's on the team, the Olympic marathon is not like other marathons. It only happens once every 4 years. I'm stating very simple facts here, but the fact, it only happens once every 4 years. The conditions, you never really know. The style of race, it's like Constantina Dida won it for Romania back in 2008. And that's just, she's not really someone we speak of as a marathon legend, but she is an Olympic champion. And, Stefano Baldini in 2004 for the men's field. Steven Kiprotich, he's not he's a world champion as well, but he's not setting the world on fire in these other races, but they're all Olympic champions. And, I guess Gwen Jorgensen, if she's Olympic marathoner, the step to Olympic champion from that, it's not impossible. But it's still pretty low. Still pretty low of just getting there. I don't want to, I got to defend my take at this point, I think.
In case you're just joining us, this is the Runner's Digest podcast with Toni Reavis, who is gone. We're at the Tracksmith headquarters. Is this Newberry Street, John?
Yep.
So I haven't been here yet, and this store is amazing. There's all this track memorabilia on the wall. People are just walking in front of us, taking pictures of Bill Rogers winning the marathon, I guess. Do they do that now? They put the year on there. It's nice, I know it's 1979. Track and Field News magazines on the wall. I guess you won't be seeing new issues of that. But speaking of track history, I got a text from Robert. And Liam, he wants me to talk to you about you anchored the 4x8 pin relay team.
I'll talk about that literally anytime. So that's my pride and joy. Anytime you want to talk about that, I will.
A bunch of Ivy League kids winning it. It's happened since then, right? But you guys were the first ones in a long time.
Princeton and Don Cabral did it twice in 1 year. I think they've done it 3 times. In Penn won with Tommy Awad once. I think that's it. But yeah, we won in 2007, and it was the first time since 1974, I want to say. And it was first time for Columbia since 1938. So it was a very, very long time for us. I wrote about it for Tracksmith, actually. I did last year put together an oral history, which is kind of funny, writing an oral history of your own self. But it was that's a story that, I think somebody asked me, did it feel weird writing about yourself and, kind of bragging? I was like, well, with that story, I'll talk about it literally any day. That is my story. Breaking 4 was cool, but that was 100 times better because it was a relay at Penn with 40,000 people watching, and we weren't supposed to do it in any way. I knew I had a chance to break 4. And in my mind, I thought we had a chance to win Penn, but I didn't really think it would happen until I crossed the finish line.
Yeah. No, it was awesome. I wasn't really following the sport at that point, but I remember when I went on my recruiting trip to Columbia in 2009, 2 years later, they were talking about this. That was they wouldn't shut up about it, even though, and again, rightly so. It was incredible for a bunch of Ivy League guys to do that because, that wasn't when there was a period in maybe the early 2010s with Cabral and with some of those other guys where the Ivy League was actually kind of a power for a little bit. Princeton won the DMR and NCAAs. Mm-hmm. But back then, not as much the case. So for an Ivy League team to beat some of the Blue Bloods, really impressive. I want to say they probably showed off the wheel to me that you guys got. There's some sort of big poster or something of you guys. So it was definitely pretty cool for me to see as a recruit, though. There's no way I was ever going to be on a 4x8. I was a 10K guy in college. So.
No, I don't like going back to the Columbia track office now because they have a larger than life-size poster of the finish still. Like, and it's a great picture. Like, I love the picture, but it's embarrassing to walk in there because I think I'm probably 12 feet tall, and it's just this huge poster. And it's awkward walking in. My sister's now a junior at Columbia, so whenever she has to go see the coaches, she gets to also see me.
Who'd you beat on the anchor?
Andrew Ellerton and Prince Mumba. I get the baton with a lead, though, so that's something to always remember. That Harrison Hertalt, who took third in the 400 that year at NCAAs, he was kind of our secret weapon. He was this 400 guy who could split. I guess he only split 150 point that day, but he was 8th with 200 to go and handed the baton to me with a 5-meter lead, and it's honestly like it was so incredible. He's a 2-time Olympian for Dominica, but then I got the baton in first, and Mumba passed me probably 200 meters into the race along with an LSU guy. And Ellerton, I think, split a second faster than me, but he got the baton further back. So I was able to burst by him with it all in the last 40 meters, I want to say.
Yeah, Ellerton, was he an NCAA champion at 800? I feel like he was.
He ended up winning NCAAs that year in the 800.
Yeah.
I was dead last in the NCAA 800 that year.
You didn't get him at NCAAs, but you got, I think, that memory will last a lifetime, I'm sure.
Oh, for sure.
What do you think, Penn Relays crowd versus, maybe you haven't experienced, I don't know if you've experienced Boston Marathon crowd or no, but which one's better, do you think, for a sporting event, spectacle, that sort of thing?
I mean, I'm a little impartial to Penn, but I feel like it's a different, like this whole weekend is just, there's a fun energy here. And I've been in New York for the marathon as well, and I wouldn't say it's the same as this either. But there's just a fun energy the whole time. This is my second time being up here for marathon weekend. But I guess Penn is just its own energy too. And Penn can get exhausting. There's race after race after race. Somebody recently asked me if they should go all 3 days. And I said, well, pick and choose what parts you're going to go for all 3 days at Penn, because it is a blast, but it's a lot, and you can only watch so many high school 4x4s or pro 4x4s or college 4x4s even.
Yeah. No, it reminds me of the BU meets here, where it's just heat after heat of the men's 200, and it just goes all day. But the energy, like you said, it definitely is palpable walking around the city. And I think an event like marathon and the New York City Marathon, that's a much bigger marathon in terms of the number of people who are running. But New York City is also a much bigger city than Boston, and I feel like the city sort of just swallows up the marathoners, and there's always going to be hotel rooms for that, and it's not going to be an issue. Whereas Boston, if you're walking around the Back Bay this weekend, everyone's got a marathon bag, they've got some sort of pullover, there's a bib number, every business has some sort of blue and yellow ribbons or balloons or something, or some encouraging message. You can't walk 2 feet without bumping into someone with a marathon tie, or he's running or supporting or something like that. It's just, I don't think that's the case in most major marathon cities, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. I think one of my favorite places, I've worked with, Mary Wittenberg at Virgin Sport. We did some events with her through my work, and we the finish line of any race is just like so happy. It's one of the best places in the world, which is going down Boylston. It's just going to be really cool to be in Copley Square tomorrow, although the weather's going to probably not have as many smiles, but it'll still be people are going to be really happy despite that, because they're going to have just run 26.2 miles. So it's just a really cool thing, and I'm excited to be here.
I don't know.
We've got somebody asking us for advice on something, and we don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not exactly knowledgeable on that sort of thing. But and one other thing maybe to point out, I got a chance to walk by the finish line yesterday. Today is the 5-year anniversary of the bombings from 2013, and there's a really nice impromptu sort of memorial set up in front of Marathon Sports. But I would advise anyone who's in town for it, or anyone listening who gets a chance, to just sort of walk by there and take a moment to look and remember, because it was really a pretty dark day in this race's history. But I think everyone involved in the event has responded better than anyone could have possibly imagined, and obviously there's a memorial, but I don't think it's dampened the enthusiasm. If anything, it made people more resilient and more excited about taking back this day in this race.
Yeah, and I mean, it also you get to bring up Meb anytime you talk about 2013, because 2014 was kind of just this great moment that kind of didn't solve everything, obviously, but it kind of redeemed a lot of things. And I mean, that's I watched the documentary about Meb this year, and the episode about Boston, I still get chills. Like, it's just, there really isn't anything better in the sport than that one right there. It was just so amazing.
How much longer do we want to keep going?
Yeah, the Meb year was, it's still fake, right? I mean, if Disney wrote the movie, you wouldn't believe it. When we had the bombing, and then the next year, because I was here the year of the bombing, and then I wasn't here the next year, and I was watching it on TV, and I started just yelling at the TV. I thought, well, sure, he's going to get caught, and then, no, it didn't happen. And he was so past his prime then. I mean,
yeah. And he ran a PR. He had a 2:09 PR going into the race. He ran 2:08.37, dropped the entire field. Des Cometto was in that race. He dropped out. He ended up breaking the world record about 5 months later. Lalisa DeCiso was in there. I mean, everything broke right. It still doesn't make sense to me that a 38-year-old guy who, people had already said was past his prime multiple times. They were saying that before he won New York, I think, in 2009, that he was done. And, he came back. He made 2 more Olympic teams, 4th in the 2012 Olympics. It's just, absolutely amazing.
It's a good thing Robert's not here. Let's Run.com founder Robert Johnson, who's a coach at Cornell. He wants to still ask questions about the 4x8, saying, he says, I was at that race, and I turned to him and said, they just did what you were dreaming of. So, hey, your dreams become reality, but not necessarily for everybody. But now he wants to know, who would have won fresh, you or Michigan?
Us.
Of course.
We were ready. We were ready to win that race no matter what it was.
It was like Meb. You guys were. It was just. I feel like certain things in sports sort of. It's why you run the race. It's why we're all here. It's why we're as kids. We dream of making the Olympics. Like, most of us it doesn't happen, but you're inspired along the way, and for those who keep inspiring us, it's I don't know. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yes, as you just said, sports. Notre Dame beating UConn and then winning the basketball championship on a buzzer beater from the same woman. Like, that's not supposed to happen, but sports are really, really cool. And I think every time something crazy happens in sports, I just tweet out sports. And, 'cause it is just amazing. There's nothing like it, in my opinion. Like, no matter what the sport is, it's just people doing heroic things, doing things they're not supposed to do, and it's really, really cool.
No, it's the same way. Like, I've been a sports nut my whole life, and it's something Bob Ryan, the legendary Boston Globe sports writer, he always says after one of those great events, like, people who don't have sports in their life, they don't know what they're missing out on. And, you got to invest some time and energy to follow it, and not all the stuff you watch is going to be great, but sometimes you get a moment, and it's just, even as a fan, you can't really come close to replicating that feeling watching it. So that's, it's great, and it's one of the reasons I love this race every year, because you never know exactly what you're going to get. But I guess we asked you women's prediction. What about the men's side? Do you have a pick there?
Yeah, I do think Rupp's going to win. I think as you said, Karui is going to be tough to beat again, but I do think it, especially from hearing about his training and everything, and him running really fast. Was it Rome, his half marathon?
Yep.
I think he's just there. He won Chicago, and I just do think he's going to win. He's one of the best runners in the world, and I think he's going to show that again tomorrow. And I think Rupp does know how to run well in bad weather, so I think that's not going to be too big of a deal for him. I think he's going to be ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Weldon, we didn't. I gave my women's predictions earlier. Do you have predictions to make? Is there anything you want to say about the outcome of these races? Because Let's Run Nation wants to know who you guys are backing. We got to ask Rojo to text in his picks as well.
No, we got Rojo on the phone somehow.
Oh, okay.
Can we get him in? Robert, are you there? Say something.
I am here.
Wow, joining us by the
magic of
telephone.
Yeah, telephone. Been around for 100+ years.
You're sounding like an omnipresent God. You're like just coming from the sky above us.
I had to get out of Boston. I was very upset. The Red Sox are beating up on my beloved Orioles. Just lost another one. But I'm a little disappointed. No one is talking about the big thing I've been thinking about. And I'm not smart enough to know exactly what's going to happen, but my big prediction for the weekend is Galen Rupp will definitely have some sort of mid-race wardrobe change. I know he switched hats in hot weather and got an ice pack. I'm trying to think what he could do tomorrow. Will he have new gloves every 5 kilometers? There's got to be something from a technological standpoint, and I say this out of respect that Alberto Salazar has thought of. Can you guys come up with something? It's got to be something. I'm virtually certain that's going to happen.
I've got one. How about tearaway half tights? So he goes in there with about 3 layers of half tights, and whenever one starts getting wet, He rips away. Nike have some sort of Velcro technology or whatever, and he's got another fresh pair right below to keep his legs dry, because I've noticed he races in half tights this sort of weather. So that's my bold prediction. He's got tearaway half tights. Do you have anything, Liam or Weldon?
I think he will have something. I mean, at Rio, he's more prepared. He's got the hat, rotating the hat. People, there's the gray line or the black line they're approaching or crossing, but apart from all of that stuff, they're better prepared than everybody else. I mean, or they think of things that the rest of us don't think of. So if it's raining and torrential rains, I don't know, maybe he'll have holes in his shirt. I don't know if that helps, or a different material on, or like probably a trash bag that you tear off is a little too low tech, but
umbrella hat, maybe something that you got gives him a little radius around the body, or something that bounces the rain off onto other competitors, something like that. I don't know. I know that happens. It seems like it happens every time we see Rupp at a big race, though. It's like, wait, why is he wearing this tape? I remember before Chicago, I saw some pictures of him in this vest doing some workouts, and I'm like, that doesn't look like a normal running vest. Is there like weights in there or anything? And I asked him repeatedly in the press conference, I'm like, Galen, can you tell me about this vest? And he's like, what vest? I wasn't what do you mean? And I'm like, you were wearing vest. There was this picture on Twitter, the one you wore like 2 days ago. He's like, I don't remember wearing a vest, anything like that. And then after that, his agent Ricky Sims comes up to me. He's just like, yeah, it was just a normal vest. But, they don't want to give away any details about any part of that wardrobe, even if it's just a normal vest.
I've got a buddy who's running the race tomorrow. His goal is to break 3 hours, and he is going to have his father stopping at 10 and 17 with a dry long sleeve. So if Galen needs anything, I'm sure Bill Verge can help out with that.
I mean, is that legal? Let's run, people. You need a post.
Oh, no, did I just get my buddy in trouble?
I don't know. Are you allowed? You didn't say his name. We may have to disqualify him.
I said his dad's name. I shouldn't have.
Someone's going to go or submit him to the Marathon Investigators, cheating website. So,
for his dad giving him a shirt. I hope not. No, it's not happening. I made that up.
Rojo, can you still hear us? Oh, maybe he's dealing with his baby. All right, I think we should answer some of these questions. Oh, there you are. I think we should answer some of the questions in the chat box, and then we'll finish with our predictions. Does that sound good? All right. Well, the first question, are we going to make our predictions? Yeah, we're doing that last. Why is Tola running this race so soon after Dubai? Seems doubtful he's in top form.
I mean, if you read our previews, which I encourage you all to do if you haven't already, you'll notice that of the last 5 champions in Boston, 3 of them ran very well at the Dubai Marathon just 3 months before the race. It's not an uncommon double. Lisa DeCisa did it both times. He won Boston. He won Dubai in 2013, and then 2015, I think he ran pretty fast and got second or so. And then Lemmy Bahanu in 2016, when he won Boston, he was, I think, second in Dubai. It's, if you're that kind of marathoner who can run a bunch in 1 year, maybe by a bunch I mean 3, and we don't really know if Tola is that, but it's possible. These other guys from Ethiopia have shown it's possible to do that and come back and have success. That's why I don't think it's that weird. We've seen it before.
Yeah, I think with his track speed, he's definitely one to watch if it's a slower race, but I think Galen will be more prepared for the rain, just living in Portland. I don't know if that means anything, but...
Well, the thing, I always know, Galen's a great heat runner, and he doesn't like the cold. His asthma usually picks up in the cold. I don't think it's going to be cold enough tomorrow for that to be a problem, but I think if you could give Galen his choice of what elements he wanted to race in, he would probably say super hot, because I think that puts him at the greatest relative advantage versus the rest of the field. This sort of thing, I can't really remember him doing a lot of races into a big wind. I do remember in 2012 at the Olympic trials, he killed the 10K in the rain. So, and he led a big chunk of that and helped Ritz get the standard. Was no problem at all for him. But that's a little different. I think it was warmer then than it's going to be tomorrow.
That half marathon where he was jogged it, looked like in 101 pace in Portland.
Oh, yeah, to get his Olympic trials
qualified. He had long
qualified.
sleeves on. I don't know if it was raining, but I just...
And it was a headwind in Rome when he ran his 59:47. It is a net downhill, but it was a windy day that day. So I think he'll be fine.
Someone else answered in the chat box, money. Yeah, these guys, if you're a top African star, you're not going to get the appearance fees the same amount that a Galen Rupp's going to be. And that's the richest marathon in the world. So take a shot at that, and you can come back here. The guys have shown you can do 3 top marathons a year.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 may be ideal, but if you're gonna, if you can take home another 6-figure payday, why not? All right, next question from MCB625. Will Alberto show his face to the media in Boston, or is he too afraid to answer doping questions?
I saw Alberto yesterday, actually. He was at the BAA 5K. I didn't talk to him. We're not best buds. But, I think after Rupp won Chicago, so after Boston last year, Alberto was here, but he didn't talk to media. He let Pete Julian handle that because Julian coaches Asako, and he let him speak about Hussein. But I think if Rupp wins, I would expect Alberto to talk to the media. And, I asked him a couple questions about the USADA report after Chicago last year, which he wasn't thrilled about, and he sort of put an end to the interview, though granted the press conference was about to start. I think if Rupp wins or if Hussein wins tomorrow, he'll talk. I don't know what he'll say if we ask him about that sort of thing. He'll probably ask us. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how he'll react to those sort of questions, but I do expect him to talk if Rupp or Hussein wins.
Yeah, he wasn't at Worlds last year in track for the first time in a long time, I feel like, but he was in Chicago, and I don't know what people think. What's he gonna do? Like, admit to some vast conspiracy? I mean, people love, and I think journalists love. Oh, I want to ask the questions, but it's sort of, I feel like a lot of it's just a game, right? Like, what are we gonna get? Journalists get mad when people don't answer the questions, but it's not. I don't think anyone's ever gotten a confession. Or I don't know, but sort of people love, I think, to read in between the lines, or
I think there's I think there's a journalistic value to asking the questions to see how they respond, but I don't think people when they're asking them those things, I don't think they're expecting a confession. They just want to put the question to him and see how he responds.
Yeah, there's a duty kind of to ask that question, I guess. If you don't, you're probably going to get it. I already wrote about this. That's what he'll say, and that's fine. That's a fine answer. That's how he can answer. But if you stop asking, then people will forget, and it still is a story. That's still an investigation that's going on, so it still is worth asking, even if you're not going to get an answer out of it.
Yeah, I got 2 trained journalists here. Thank you for that advice. I never know why we're doing this, but you're right. I think it is still ongoing. People act like it's over, but USADA, I think it was over a year ago, sort of served Jeffrey Brown, made it sound like they might charge him, but nothing happens. I feel like for the sake of the sport, it would be better if they actually just decided one way or the other, but, I swear like every 6 months I have to go get back up to speed about what's going on. And, I was glad to see the Boston Globe article because it puts it back in the mainstream and sort of these questions need to be asked. And it was interesting, I thought, to sort of see what some of Amby and I guess Bill and, they totally are on Alberto's side, it seems like. And, he's totally trustworthy. And, I went back and read the that leaked USADA report. And my reading of that was like he totally misled his own athletes. I think we also can lie to ourselves or sort of give the best impression. So maybe, we all do this. But he's like, I'm running this by USADA. Like, this is all above board. And, I think he had emailed USADA, but they definitely weren't saying, yeah, you definitely can do this. But maybe in his mind, he's like, I can tell them that it's above board. So an outsider's like, he's lying to his own athletes. But, I think he definitely misled them and sort of where does that come to an end? But, all right, we'll keep asking those questions. Everybody wants to know when Galen's going to run a fast time. 2:09 marathoner, Galen Rupp. Which is crazy. I can't believe people. I mean, he is a 2:09 marathoner, and I guess I'll be a 2:18 marathoner till I'm dead. But we all are, Galen's so much better than that. I mean, one scenario in my head is he just blows everyone away tomorrow. So, when will he win a fast time? And if he wins this race, what do you think he does next?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's not running a fast time tomorrow. We know that much. But I think if he wins this race, then New York is probably next, realistically. Like, why not keep on just going in the U.S. where people are going to care about this? It's probably worth more for him and for Nike if he keeps on winning these U.S. marathons. So if he is able to win tomorrow, New York wouldn't surprise me at all. But it also wouldn't be bad to see him go run, Berlin in the fall and actually try to run 2:05 or whatever it's going to be, because I think he is capable of something crazy like that if he is capable of an American record.
Yeah, I think win or lose, it's probably as the defending champion in Chicago, maybe there's an allure to going back there. That's possible as well. But yeah, I think it's either Chicago or New York. I just don't think he'd go to Berlin because Berlin is always geared up to be a world record attempt. And as good as Galen is in the marathon, I don't think he can run 2:02:57. And I think that Salazar and Rupp probably know that as well. And they probably think, look, if we go there and try to hang with the leaders, there's definitely a chance it doesn't go well at all. And maybe there's a small chance that he breaks the world record, but they're not going to put him in a situation like that he's not ready and prepared for. And if you want to see him run his best possible race, you need to maybe put him in a smaller race like Frankfurt, where the winning time's usually like 2:04, 2:05, and that's geared towards him running that. Or you just set up, I'm sure Nike and the NOP have the resources, just whatever marathon they want to do. Like, if it's a smaller race, they'll just bring in a few personal rabbits and say, all right, the only goal of this race, and maybe it's like some tiny one in France or whatever, like, the equivalent of breaking 2, but maybe an actual marathon. They just say, all right, we want Rupp to run 2:04 flat, and here are his 2 rabbits, and here you go. Nothing they would do surprised me, but I think what Liam said is probably more accurate. He, as long as he has success doing these races and he knows he can win or contend, why wouldn't he continue to do that? I don't think that time is – it's never been – it's something that Galen seems like he would like to get in the marathon one day, but it's not something he's going to search out, I don't think. But that said, I would love to see him run the London Marathon next year and take on Kipchoge.
Yeah, but he wins here. I think for sure New York is the one to go. There's a lot more money, and it's an American race. And then I feel like you'd have to come back here to defend. There's a lot more money. But at some point, Galen's shown it's not about the money, and he's so paid so well by Nike, which some of these other guys aren't. But, if he wins here, he's won Chicago, he has an Olympic medal. I don't see how you can't say it's top 5 marathon in the world, and those are the guys who can go to Berlin. But at the same time, if your body's never physically run that many miles, or you've only run 2:09 pace, to go do 2:03, I think for sure he could run under 2:05. I don't know why people wouldn't think that if he had won this race, but I guess you have guys like Kiprotich or something who are, tactical race specialists, but
right.
I don't see why he couldn't run a. I get challenging the world record's crazy for anyone, but I don't think he'll do it. It just doesn't logistically make out, and then you'd be your 2019. You got the trials coming up.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would be till after 2020.
Yeah, at that point,
Eugene 2021. That'll be his fast one. One final question before I think we kind of wrap it up with our predictions. People want to know how difficult we think it'll be for the non-elites. Can we just tuck in behind the thousands of people in front of us and avoid the wind?
No. You're not going to be able to avoid the wind if you're running 26.2 miles. I know there's going to be a lot of people on the course. Maybe the first few miles, which are always really slow, and you're sort of weaving out. But, yeah, if you're running out there, you just got to be prepared. It's going to be slower than usual. You're probably not going to PR. But it's, take advantage of the fans who are there and have fun, because it's really a marathon unlike any other in the world.
If you're really smart, you'll pay the people around you to do the diamond pacing from breaking.
Yeah, anyone have a Tesla that they can rent out tomorrow for the running on the course? So what are you thinking, Weldon? Prediction time, or do we have anything else?
I think we're ready. Robert said he's got some hot sports opinions. Robert.
When doesn't he?
Robert, speak up to make sure we can still hear you.
Yes.
Okay,
I can hear you. It's just a little bit hard.
All right, we're ready. We're ready for our predictions.
Okay, I will lead off. First of all, I think making predictions is next to impossible. I've always believed that running a distance race, whether it's a 10K or marathon in hot weather, is like a different sport. Some people just are not good at it. I definitely think that we know hot weather with the technology and the hats definitely benefits Galen Rupp. I'm not sure what the cold weather does. I'm pretty confident that there's several Africans in this race.
Well, it looks like we lost him. Robert is right. There are several Africans in this race. That's a fact. But I don't know if we can say anything about his predictions beyond that. But I guess we'll shift over to Liam. We already got your we got your women's pick. How about your men's pick?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I got Rupp. I'm gonna go 2:10.
Can you hear me?
I think he's gonna run pretty fast actually, and I'm gonna go 2:10.
2:10 for Rupp.
2:10 for Rupp, and I'm gonna go Molly to win in 2:23. No, 25. Yeah, 25.
Thank you for bailing out my forgetful self on that with the times. That was very good. Well, I already gave my men's pick. I'll give my women's pick right now, and that is Shalane Flanagan. Going Shalane for the win. I just think she won New York last year. That's really, really good. She's still really good at running. She's tough as nails. I think maybe it would be just a good story as well. I've gone with that. You could pick Molly, you could pick Shalane, you could pick Jordan Say, you could pick Edna Kiplagat. I wouldn't fault you for any of those picks, but I will say Shalane, and probably I'm gonna go really slow. I think probably around 2:29ish or 2:28, somewhere in that range. And men's race, I already gave those earlier in the show, but Rupp, Karui, Tola in that order. I will say winning time of, again, I'm going to go slow, probably about 2:13. Weldon, what are you thinking?
Wow, pretty slow. Have we given out the official Let's Run predictions from the Running Warehouse?
Yes, we
prediction
have.
contest? We have. All right. I don't know. We also have Robert back on the line, I believe. But, yeah, you started going through it, and I didn't like how high everybody was on Molly Huddle. And then I'm like, well, someone else has got to win this race. And I'm like, okay, well, there's really, the women's field is not that deep, just outside of the Americans. You have 4 very good Americans, but then, Edna's getting old. She was great last year, but when does that end? And Murgy, I guess, that's it. I don't think anybody else can win this race outside of those 6.
Maybe Gladys Chesia. She's run a lot of good half marathons. She ran 2:24 in her debut in Amsterdam last year. Flying a little under the radar, I would point her out as someone dark horse.
Maybe I should just pick her.
Yeah.
Because I can't. I guess I'd have to go with Flanagan. I don't know. Everyone's so high on Huddle, and I'm like, Flanagan's a better proven marathoner.
Yeah.
I was all about the Jordan Hassay train, but I know I can tell from the chat box. Robert, give us your thoughts on Jordan.
I feel like Jordan. I don't know. As I was saying before I got cut off, I feel like, I don't know, Jordan's from California. I don't see how this cold and windy weather is going to help her. I think it's going to hurt her. But I feel like running in cold and rain and wind is like a different sport. And what I was trying to say was, I'm certain that there's several Africans in this race that have never, ever run a mile in 35-degree weather and rain. I bet it's never that cold in Africa. And when it is cold over there, a lot of times they just, and windy and rainy, they just stay in. So I definitely don't think it helps to say. On the women's side, I was thinking maybe Huddle. She's from Providence, but I think the smarter pick is Flanagan. I would say Huddle or Flanagan on the women's side. And on the men's side, I guess my big prediction was, I really think you guys are going way too fast on the times. Had a lengthy conversation. I'm about to publish the article with John Kellogg, who is our wind expert, and he's saying 2:14, 2:15. So it looks to me that it's going to be the slowest. My big prediction on the men's side is the slowest winning time in over 40 years. We've only had, this is a race. Think about this, guys. 2 times in the last 6 years, we've had a 2:12:40 race. It was 2:12:45 and 2:12:40, 2016 and 2012. I know it's hot, but those were hot races. But it's going to be cold. But I just think, we can easily be over 2:14. It's been with 2:14:13 in 2007, 2:14:05 in 1985. But then you got to go all the way back to 1977, 2:14:46. So something over 2:15 wouldn't stun me. That's sort of, I guess, my big prediction. I don't know on the men's side, like who's going to be tough. I don't think that the weather is going to impact Rupp in a really bad way. I think he's tough and will be a contender. I don't know if he's going to win, but I would like to pick, Tola. I was very impressed by him, but I just don't know how the weather's going to impact him or Karui, guys like that. So I don't feel comfortable making an individual pick. I'll have to do it at some point between now and the start of the race. But my big prediction is slowest winning time in 40 years on the mid-sec.
Robert, that's really weak. You're making a prediction about a time, and you're not going to give me the name of someone who's going to win.
Okay,
that's pretty lame.
With my boy Karui, then. Karui, toughness. He's the guy. Karui is my champion. Your champion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, looking at the final sort of weather forecast here. It's saying 20-mile-an-hour winds, light rain. It's not as bad as I thought, but I think 2007, it wasn't that bad, and the winning times were 2:29 and 2:14. So.
And then I'll go with Huddle.
All right, Huddle. Robert's on record. Huddle and Karui. Weldon, did you make a men's pick?
I'll go with Tola. It looks smart. I want to get Desi Linden's name in here just in case she wins the damn thing. But I guarantee she's probably the most excited of anyone with this weather. I mean, she's a gamer. She goes out there. We're always accused of, selling her short on Let's Run, and I think that's a
I think
good
every
compliment.
media outlet in history has been accused of that, and anytime I think Desi, her name is never mentioned in any other context as the one that you just brought up. Oh, hey, let's mention Desi Linden because she's really good, but no one talks about her. But then we talk about her. That's usually how it goes.
Yeah, we used to sell Meb short every time, and he'd come out and win. But I don't know. It should be great, and I don't want it to be like, semi-hurricane, but I'm fine with 20-mile rains and a nice little downpour.
Yeah, for sure.
Just see what happens. It's more interesting.
Yeah.
The Copley Hotel is pretty warm, from what I remember.
Definitely. You got hot tea, hot coffee, whatever you want. It's pretty nice.
You want to give us your pick?
All right. So I think we're pretty much good here, Weldon. I think it's time to relax, get in your last meal before the race, and then time to watch some running tomorrow.
Yeah, it should be great. I want to give a big thanks to Matt Taylor and Tracksmith. I'm glad I got here. My flight was delayed because of the weather, and this place is really cool. I see some Normatec. Can you get free Normatec here, Matt? Normatec, new Let'sRun.com sponsor. It's like a massage thing. You can come here, check it out for free. But I'm going to go play the Track and Field Konami video game. It's like I don't even know what you call the things, the stand-up video games. Like
arcade game.
Old school, like arcade.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I don't know if I have to put a quarter in there. There's some beer here, too, which I haven't.
Yeah, no, it's really been. I want to say another thanks to someone who's been here all 3 days, to Matt and Tracksmith for setting all this up. It's really, it's just a cool haunt for runners to head to. It's a great location. They put out some really, Matt's not paying me to say this, but they put out some nice gear and everything. It's just a cool place to hang out and get the spirit of the marathon running through your veins. So, thanks for putting it on. And I think I had fun doing these shows. I don't know hopefully we had some listeners back home, but yeah.
And we fixed the sound today. It's great. So.
And thanks to Liam as well for coming on
Liam,
and
thank you.
Sharing his time. We probably stole too much of it, but it was nice hearing from you and flashing back on the great 2007 Columbia 4x8 team.
And Matt says the Track and Field Konami game is free, but I think it should only be free with purchase, Matt. I'm going to help your marketing here. So for Toni Reavis, Tony deserves the biggest, I think. Thank you. This was his show, but he had to go get ready for the TV broadcast. So we'll try to have a link up. Sometimes the local broadcast is available for streaming outside of the U.S. if the geo-blocking doesn't work, but everyone in the New England area, please watch it locally, but otherwise the race will be on
NBC Sports Network.
Yep, NBC Sports. So, hey, it's a holiday in New England tomorrow, so everyone else take off from work. You got
grab a beer, sit in front of the TV. There's nothing better.
All right, so this is Weldon Johnson for Let'sRun.com, Toni Reavis, and signing off from the Tracksmith Trackhouse. Thank you, guys.